She walked into the interview room praying for a job, never expecting the man across the desk to be the father of her secret child. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Camila Montenegro's small apartment, gilding the edges of the cramped room in soft gold. She stood before the cracked mirror, smoothing the lapels of the navy blazer she had spent her last $50 on. It wasn't designer, it wasn't even new, but paired with a crisp white blouse and a pencil skirt that hugged her slim waist, it looked sharp enough to fool anyone into believing she belonged in the polished corridors of Cain Enterprises. Her reflection showed a woman with determined dark eyes and black hair pulled into a bun that spoke of discipline she often had to force upon herself. At 28, she carried herself with quiet strength, but beneath it was the relentless thrum of fear of failure, fear of rejection, and most of all, fear of secrets coming to light. From the bed in the corner, a soft sigh pulled her eyes away. Diego, her 5-year-old son, lay sprawled in sleep, curls spread over his pillow like a halo. His small chest rose and fell in the rhythm of dreams, his mouth parted slightly, his hand clutching a toy car as if it were a lifeline. Camila's heart clenched at the sight. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every odd job had been for him. She bent down, brushing a kiss over his warm forehead. "Mommy has a very important meeting today," she whispered, though her voice wavered under the weight of everything those words meant. He stirred but didn't wake. Thank God. She couldn't bear the questions he sometimes asked. Questions about fathers and families she had no answers for. By the time Rosa Hernandez, the elderly neighbor who adored Diego like a grandchild, arrived, Camila was already pulling her worn leather portfolio to her chest. "I'll be back soon," she promised Rosa, though her own nerves betrayed her. Soon she was swallowed by the city, the subway rattling her toward downtown like it carried her fate in its iron veins. Cain Enterprises loomed like a monument when she arrived, its glass facade reflecting the skyline. The 40-story tower gleamed in the autumn sun, a fortress of power and wealth. Walking into the marble-floored lobby, Camila felt impossibly small, yet she squared her shoulders, refusing to let the intimidation seep into her veins. She belonged here, or at least she had to make them believe she did. The elevator ride stretched endlessly, every floor a step closer to the interview that could change everything. By the time the doors slid open on the top level, her palms were damp despite the folder clutched between them. The reception area was pristine, white marble, chrome fixtures, orchids in crystal vases. Success lingered in the air like an expensive cologne. Patricia Wells appeared, silver hair framing kind eyes behind sleek glasses. "Miss Montenegro," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Your portfolio was exceptional, truly creative work." Compliments washed over Camila, bolstering her nerves, until Patricia said the words that sent a chill through her. "You'll be meeting with Mr. Cain personally. He likes to select his closest staff himself." The name struck like a physical blow, though Camila's face remained carefully composed. Sebastian Cain, the man who owned this empire. The man whose green eyes still haunted her dreams after one reckless night in Miami 5 years ago. The man who had unknowingly given her Diego. Patricia led her through corridors lined with art and glass-walled conference rooms where executives murmured like players in some unreachable world. At last, they stopped before towering mahogany doors. "Mr. Cain is waiting," Patricia said, pushing them open. The office inside was a kingdom, panoramic views of the city, shelves of business tomes and novels, a desk carved like a throne. But it wasn't the space that made Camila's pulse stumble. It was the man rising from behind the desk. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal suit cut to perfection, Sebastian Cain carried the kind of presence that bent a room to his will. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, but his eyes, those brilliant green eyes, were unchanged. The same eyes that looked at her across a crowded hotel bar 5 years ago, that softened when she laughed, that blazed when he kissed her. Their gazes locked now, and she saw it. Recognition. His expression faltered, a ripple breaking the polished mask of the ruthless CEO. In that split second, his pupils dilated, his breath caught, and memory lit the space between them like lightning. "Miss Montenegro," he said, his voice calm but edged with something raw, something only she would hear. "Please, have a seat." Her legs carried her forward, though they trembled. She lowered herself into the chair across from his desk, her portfolio clutched like a shield. Patricia settled beside them, oblivious to the storm tightening the air. Camila forced her lips into a polite smile, her heart a drumbeat of panic and longing. He remembered, and so did she, but neither could afford to speak the truth. Not here, not now. The interview had begun, and so had the unraveling of the secret she had fought to protect for 5 years. The second morning of Camila's new reality dawned with a gray heaviness, as if the city itself sensed the storm swirling beneath the surface of Cain Enterprises. The elevator doors slid open onto the executive floor, and her breath caught in her throat the way it always did when she stepped into that rarefied world, where everything gleamed, every voice was hushed but purposeful, and power pulsed through the air like electricity. Her glass-walled office waited, sleek and modern, positioned directly outside Sebastian Cain's. She adjusted the strap of her briefcase as though it could steady her trembling hands. Inside his office, she could see him already, pacing, tie loosened, his strong profile illuminated by the pale morning light pouring through the windows. He was speaking into a headset in rapid-fire German, every syllable crisp, commanding. But in the space between words, his eyes flicked toward her. That single glance pierced the barrier of glass, burning through her composure as though they shared some unspoken frequency. The tension between them was a taut wire, humming louder with each passing hour. Their first official interaction that morning nearly unmoored her. He strode out of his office with that signature-controlled stride, green eyes sharp, jaw set with determination. He stopped in front of her desk, dropping a file thick with contracts onto the polished surface. "I need the Morrison projections, the quarterly reports for Singapore, and coffee. Black. 2 sugars." His voice was clipped, businesslike, but the flicker in his gaze betrayed him. Camila's stomach lurched. Coffee. Black. 2 sugars. Exactly how she had ordered it for him that morning in Miami when room service had arrived, when her heart had still been light with laughter and possibility. Did he remember? The smallest curl of his mouth suggested he did. "Yes, Mr. Cain," she replied smoothly, though her heart thundered. He lingered a second too long, studying her face as though each expression carried a clue he desperately needed. Then, with a subtle tilt of his head, he returned to his office, the unspoken words trailing after him like shadows. Hours passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and document preparation, but the hum of suspense never faded. Each time Sebastian leaned over her shoulder to scan a briefing, she caught the faint scent of his cologne, achingly familiar, a sensory ghost from that hotel night. When their hands brushed as she passed him a file, the spark jolted her so sharply she nearly dropped it. By afternoon, the storm thickened. Patricia entered, introducing a visitor who swept into Sebastian's office without hesitation. Carmen Santos, a name Camila had only ever read in business magazines, accompanied by glossy photos of the glamorous heiress who had once worn Sebastian Cain's ring. She was tall, platinum-haired, dressed in a crimson sheath that radiated wealth and danger. Camila remained at her desk, but her pulse quickened as muffled voices spilled through the glass. Carmen's laugh, rich, polished, practiced, carried across the room like the sound of silver bells. Sebastian's body language changed instantly, stiffened shoulders, clipped tone, hands tightening on the edge of his desk. Through the glass, Camila could see Carmen glide closer, her eyes glittering like sharpened ice. Then Carmen's gaze shifted, following Sebastian's glance toward the outer office. Their eyes met, hers and Camila's, through the transparent wall. It wasn't curiosity in Carmen's expression. It was calculation. A predator recognizing another woman not as background noise, but as threat. Camila forced herself to look back down at her screen, though her blood surged hot. She heard Carmen's voice sharpen. "And who is she?" Sebastian's reply carried just enough steel to slice through the tension. "My assistant, Camila Montenegro. She's efficient." "Efficient," Carmen repeated, her tone laced with poison. "And pretty. You always did prefer your staff to be decorative as well as functional." The words sliced, "Thou does." Camila pretended not to hear. Her cheeks burned, but her expression remained trained on the glow of her computer screen. Inside the office, Sebastian's voice hardened. "Carmen, enough. Camila is a professional colleague. Nothing more." Nothing more. The words landed like a hammer and a balm all at once, both denial and defense. But even as he said them, Camila caught the subtle strain in his voice. He wasn't convincing Carmen. He wasn't even convincing himself. The tension pressed in until Camila could barely breathe. Secrets swirled like smoke, threatening to choke her. Carmen wasn't just a passing visitor. She was a storm front, her presence a warning that the past had ways of clawing into the present. As Sebastian closed his office door with finality behind his ex-fiancée, his eyes met Camila's again through the glass. For a fleeting instant, every mask fell away. She saw raw fury, guilt, and something darker, desire he could not bury. And in that moment, Camila understood something chilling. This wasn't just a job. This was a battlefield, and every glance, every word, every secret carried the weight of a war she wasn't sure she had the strength to fight. The storm that had begun with Carmen's arrival lingered like an invisible fog, heavy and suffocating, refusing to lift even as days passed. Camila tried to bury herself in work, clinging to the precision of schedules and spreadsheets, the crisp order of contracts and reports. But order was a fragile thing at Cain Enterprises, and she was learning quickly that her boss was not a man who thrived on calm. Sebastian Cain fed on pressure, on chaos, on the fire of problems no one else could solve. He was brilliant and intimidating, his green eyes flashing like lightning whenever he tore through a room full of executives. Yet when those same eyes landed on her, something softer flickered beneath the storm. The tension between them was no longer subtle. It grew like a living thing, weaving itself into every glance, every conversation, every accidental brush of hands. Camila felt it when he stood too close reviewing a presentation, when his voice dropped lower than necessary to give her instructions, when the silence between them stretched taut and dangerous. She reminded herself over and over, this was her chance, her one opportunity to build a better life for Diego. She could not afford distractions. She especially could not afford to let the truth slip. But fate never asks for permission, it simply arrives. It was Wednesday afternoon when the facade shattered. Camila had been preparing materials for a critical meeting with overseas investors when her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Sebastian was waiting for his briefing, but then she saw Rosa's name. Her hands went cold. Camila, mija. Rosa's voice was frantic, breaking through the static. It's Diego. He's burning up with fever so hot I can't bring it down. I think we need the hospital. The room tilted, the papers in her hands blurred. I'm coming right now, she whispered, already standing, already reaching for her bag. Her pulse thundered as she strode to Sebastian's office, knocking once before pushing the door open. He was mid-conversation on another call, but the sight of her face silenced him instantly. I have to go, she said, breathless. My son, he's sick, high fever, I need to take him to the hospital. For a moment, she expected him to dismiss her, to tell her duty came first. Instead, Sebastian was on his feet before she finished speaking, headset forgotten on the desk. His eyes sharpened with alarm. Which hospital? I'll take you. No, she protested, panic twisting her voice. I'll manage. But her hands trembled, betraying her, and he saw it. He moved with swift, decisive authority. Sing a button on his desk phone. Miguel, bring the car around. Emergency. Then he turned back to her, his voice low but unwavering. You're in no condition to drive. Let me help. Minutes later, they were hurtling through city traffic in the back of his sleek black Mercedes, sirens wailing somewhere in the distance. Camila's fingers dug into her lap as she whispered prayers under her breath. Beside her, Sebastian made call after call, ensuring the hospital was prepared for their arrival, pulling strings with the kind of ruthless efficiency only a man like him possessed. And yet, when he finally hung up, his hand hovered near hers, as if the urge to comfort battled with his instinct for control. Tell me about him, Sebastian said quietly, his voice breaking the silence. Your son, Diego. The name caught in her throat. Her eyes stung, but she forced herself to answer. He's 5. Bright. Loves dinosaurs and soccer. He's never been this sick before. Diego, Sebastian repeated softly, tasting the syllables as though they carried weight. A strong name. When they reached the hospital, Rosa was waiting in the pediatric ward, her weathered face etched with worry. Diego lay limp in her arms, his curls damp with sweat, his small chest heaving with each breath. Camila ran to him, gathering him against her chest, whispering promises that everything would be all right. But Sebastian froze where he stood. The sight of the boy pierced through his composure, cutting him to his very core. Diego blinked weakly, his green eyes fluttering open. Green eyes. The same shade as Sebastian's, brilliant and undeniable. The resemblance was more than passing, it was a mirror. Sebastian's world tilted violently. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from the boy. The truth he had never imagined now stood before him, living and breathing, and it felt like a punch to the chest. He's mine, Sebastian whispered, the words torn from him like a confession he hadn't meant to speak aloud. Camila looked up, her cheeks wet, her secret exposed under the sterile hospital lights. For a moment, her lips parted as though to deny it, but there was no denial possible now. The truth was written in Diego's eyes, in the shape of his face, in the blood that tied them all together. Yes, she said finally, her voice breaking. He's yours. The admission shattered the fragile balance between them, unleashing a storm neither could contain. Sebastian turned away, one hand gripping the frame of the door as if to hold himself upright. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays, of first words, of soccer games and bedtime stories. Gone. Stolen. And the woman who had haunted his dreams all this time was the same woman who had kept his son from him. "You kept him from me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "For 5 years you kept my son a secret." Camila held Diego tighter, rocking him gently, though her own body trembled. "I was protecting him," she whispered, "from you, from your world, from everything you are." Her words struck harder than any slap, and Sebastian, billionaire titan who could bend entire industries to his will, felt powerless for the first time in his life, powerless in the face of a truth that would change everything. And it was only the beginning. The days that followed the hospital revelation were a blur of fear, confusion, and a dangerous mix of emotions Camila could barely keep contained. Diego had stabilized, his fever broken under the watchful care of Dr. Martinez, but the damage between her and Sebastian was just beginning. For every tender glance he cast toward the boy, there was an equal measure of cold fire reserved for her. His silence was not the silence of indifference. It was the silence of a man holding back an eruption. By Monday morning, the outside world caught the scent of blood. When Camila stepped out of the subway near Cain Enterprises, she froze. Photographers lined the sidewalk, camera flashes exploding like gunfire, reporters shouting her name as though they had known her all their lives. Her phone buzzed with messages from numbers she didn't recognize, strangers demanding quotes, tabloids offering obscene amounts of money for her side of the story. "Billionaire CEO's secret son," the headline screamed from every newsstand. "From rags to riches, the single mother who captured Sebastian Cain." Her stomach dropped as she shoved past the mob and into the sanctuary of the lobby. Even inside the glass tower, safety was an illusion. Patricia Wells met her at the elevator, her face pale, hands trembling as she held out a newspaper. "You should see this before you go upstairs," she said softly. Camila's eyes scanned the front page, grainy photos of her entering the hospital with Sebastian at her side, her arm wrapped protectively around Diego, the child's green eyes glaringly obvious under the fluorescent lights. Her breath left her body in a sharp gasp. "How did they get these pictures?" "Hospital security cameras," Patricia replied grimly. "Someone sold the footage." The elevator doors opened to chaos. The executive floor, usually polished and calm, looked like a war zone. Lawyers, PR specialists, and board members crammed into conference rooms, their voices raised in panic. Assistants scurried like frightened birds. And in the middle of it all, Sebastian Cain stood at the head of a long glass table, his expression carved from stone. When his gaze found her, the room seemed to freeze. He dismissed the others with a single flick of his hand, his tone cold enough to slice through glass. "Camila, my office, now." She followed him inside, her heart pounding. His office had become a command center, multiple screens displaying live social media feeds, headlines crawling across ticker bars, angry messages pouring in from investors and journalists alike. He slammed the door shut behind them, then turned to face her. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Did you leak this story?" The words hit like a slap. "What? No! You needed money, you had access, and now conveniently, the world knows about Diego, about us." His jaw tightened, his fists clenched on the edge of the desk. "Tell me this wasn't your plan all along." Her blood boiled, a rage rising that she hadn't known she was capable of. She stepped closer, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you? Do you think I would use my son, our son, as a pawn for money? I have spent 5 years protecting him from exactly this nightmare, shielding him from cameras, reporters, vultures who would rip apart his childhood just for a headline. And you," she jabbed a finger toward his chest, her eyes blazing, "you dare accuse me of being the one to exploit him?" Sebastian's mask cracked, but his anger remained. "Then how do you explain this?" He waved at the screens, flashing her face, Diego's face, plastered across every news outlet. "Someone with inside knowledge, someone close to me raid us. If not you, then who?" The words hung like poisoned arrows in the air, and for a moment Camila couldn't breathe. Her chest heaved with emotion, her throat raw, tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Believe what you want, Sebastian. You've already decided I'm guilty, but know this, I would burn before I let anyone use Diego." Silence crashed between them, heavy and suffocating. He opened his mouth to reply, but the office door burst open. Miguel Torres, head of security, stormed inside, his face grim but triumphant. He held up a phone, the screen glowing with evidence. "We found our leak," Miguel announced, his voice sharp. Sebastian turned, his anger shifting, his entire body taut with anticipation. Who? Carmen Santos, Miguel said without hesitation. She hired a private investigator the moment she saw Camila at the office. When she discovered the connection to Diego, she sold the story to the press, said you needed to know what kind of woman you were getting involved with. The revelation dropped like a bomb. Camila's knees nearly gave way. She reached for the back of a chair, gripping it to stay upright. All the accusations, all the fury Sebastian had unleashed on her, built on a lie Carmen had orchestrated. Sebastian's face went ashen, his chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. He turned back to Camila, and for the first time in days, the fury in his eyes wasn't directed at her. It was aimed squarely at himself. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely, the words jagged, broken. "I should never have doubted you. I should have known." "Yes," Camila cut in, her voice steady though her hands shook. "You should have." Her dark eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her pain sharp as glass. "You should have trusted me. You should have trusted the mother of your son." Her words hung in the silence, heavier than any courtroom verdict. And Sebastian Cain, the man who conquered markets and crushed rivals without blinking, stood there stripped of his power, forced to confront the one truth he could not control. Trust once broken is not so easily repaired. And though Carmen had been unmasked, Camila knew this war was only beginning. The court summons arrived on a rainy Thursday morning, slipped under Camila's apartment door like a dagger wrapped in official paper. The envelope bore the seal of the state court, but the name stamped at the bottom of the petition made her blood run cold. Carmen Santos. She ripped it open with trembling hands. Words blurred in her vision. Challenge of paternity, demand for DNA testing, accusations of fraud and concealment. Carmen had gone further than scandal. She had weaponized the law itself. By the time Camila reached Cain Enterprises, the media was already circling like vultures. Microphones thrust toward her as she hurried inside, reporters shouting ugly questions. Did you trap him for money? Is Diego really Sebastian's child? What kind of mother hides a boy from his billionaire father? She kept her eyes forward, her jaw locked, but the cruelty of their words echoed in her chest long after the lobby doors sealed behind her. Upstairs, Sebastian was waiting. His office was dim despite the morning light, blinds drawn as if he could shut out the storm. He held the same petition in his hands, his expression carved from stone. When she entered, he looked up, anger burning at the edges of his composure, but beneath it, a deeper current of something rawer, fear. "She's filed for a court-ordered test," he said, his voice low, tight. "She's telling the world Diego isn't mine." Camila's throat tightened. "She's not just attacking you, she's attacking me, us, Diego." For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Then, Sebastian stood, slamming the papers down on the desk with such force the glass rattled. "I won't let her win, not this time." The days leading to the court hearing stretched into a waking nightmare. Camila endured endless depositions, invasive questions about her life, her choices, her finances. Lawyers for Carmen painted her as a schemer, a desperate woman who had hidden her child until the moment she could profit from exposure. They called her a gold digger, a liar, a manipulator, and though she sat with her back straight and her eyes unflinching, each accusation cut deeper than the last. Sebastian's world was no easier. His board questioned his judgment. Investors whispered about instability. His empire teetered under the weight of scandal. But when he stepped into the courtroom, he was no longer the CEO whose name commanded billions. He was a man fighting for his son. The hearing was held in a cavernous courtroom, its high ceilings echoing with whispers of reporters and curious onlookers. Judge Alina Rodriguez, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, presided from the bench. "Mr. Cain," she said as the proceedings began, "you've submitted to the DNA test as ordered. The results are before me." Every heartbeat in the room felt like an eternity. Camila sat clutching her hands in her lap, Diego at home with Rosa but vivid in her mind. Sebastian stood tall beside his attorney, but his jaw was tight, his knuckles white at his sides. Judge Rodriguez adjusted her glasses, her tone clinical but heavy with implication. "The probability of paternity is 99.9%. Mr. Cain, you are, without question, the biological father of Diego Montenegro." The words cracked through the air like a lightning strike. Relief surged through Camila, tears stinging her eyes, though she held them back. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly, shoulders sag. Jing as though the weight of 5 years and 1,000 doubts had finally been lifted. But Judge Rodriguez wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "Biology alone does not make a parent. What matters is responsibility, presence, commitment. Are you prepared, Mr. Cain, to be more than a name on a certificate? To be a father in every sense? The courtroom hushed, waiting. Sebastian stepped forward, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Yes, Your Honor, I've made mistakes. I didn't know about my son, but now that I do, I won't miss another birthday, another story, another soccer game. I will be there, for him, always. The judge turned to Camila. And you, Miss Montenegro, are you willing to allow this man into your son's life despite your history? Camila's eyes flickered to Sebastian. He stood there, powerful yet vulnerable, no longer the unreachable giant of Cain Enterprises, but a man stripped bare by truth. She inhaled deeply. I want what's best for Diego, she said, her voice thick with feeling. If Sebastian truly means what he says, then yes, he deserves the chance to know his father. The gavel struck. Then this court recognizes Diego Montenegro as the lawful child of Sebastian Cain, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The moment should have ended in relief, but as Camila rose to leave, Carmen's eyes found hers from across the room. Cold, venomous, triumphant despite defeat. She leaned close to her lawyer, whispering words that dripped like poison, and Camila knew then the war was not over. Outside, camera flashes erupted, reporters shouting questions like gunfire. Sebastian moved to shield her, his arm brushing hers as he guided her toward the waiting car. For the first time, she felt the depth of what was at stake. Not just her reputation, not just Sebastian's empire, Diego's future, their future. And as Sebastian's hand lingered on her back, steadying her as if she might collapse, Camila realized something more terrifying than Carmen's schemes or the headlines screaming her name. The most dangerous battle was not with the world outside, it was the one raging inside her heart. The verdict in family court should have been the end of it. The DNA test had silenced whispers, Judge Rodriguez's gavel had set the record straight, and on paper Diego was now acknowledged as Sebastian's son. But life after the ruling felt anything but settled. The truth had opened doors Camila had long kept barred, and now she stood on the threshold of a world she had fought to keep at bay. The media circus refused to let go. Each morning, Camila found headlines plastered with photos of her and Sebastian. Cain's family scandal turns into fairy tale, or worse, gold digger wins the jackpot. Paparazzi shadowed her to grocery stores, trailed Rosa on walks with Diego, even camped outside Diego's school. She lived in constant fear that the flash of cameras would confuse or frighten her little boy. Inside Cain Enterprises, whispers followed her down corridors. Some employees regarded her with sympathy, others with thinly veiled disdain. Was she truly qualified, or just the woman who had delivered the CEO's son into his life? Every day, she fought to prove herself capable, to silence those doubts, not just for her own sake, but for Diego's. And then there was Sebastian. The man who once existed to her as a fleeting memory was now everywhere, at her desk, across from her at meetings, beside her in hospital corridors, walking her home through relentless camera flashes. The air between them was no longer simply charged with unspoken desire. It was thick with something far more dangerous. Hope. It was a late evening, long after the rest of the executive floor had gone dark, when the walls between them finally cracked. Camila sat at her desk, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders as she organized Sebastian's calendar for the week. Through the glass, she saw him still at his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, staring out at the city lights with a look she couldn't read. When he emerged into her office, he didn't carry files or orders, just silence. He leaned against her desk, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. You saved him, Sebastian said quietly. Camila blinked. Diego? He nodded. His voice was raw, stripped of the commanding timbre he wielded in boardrooms. You raised him without me. You gave him love, stability, everything I should have given him but didn't know he needed. You did it all, alone, and you did it brilliantly. Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. I did my best. You did more than that, he said, his gaze holding hers like a lifeline. And I... He faltered, then shook his head, frustration with himself etched in his features. I doubted you. I accused you. I let Carmen's poison blind me. And still, you stand here, letting me into his life. Camila swallowed hard, the weight of his confession pressing against the dam she'd built inside her chest. Because Diego deserves you. Not your money, not your empire, you. The silence between them burned hotter than words. For a moment the world shrank to the space they shared, the rhythmic thrum of the city beyond. Into the glass, the pulse of his hand resting against her desk, the ragged beat of her own heart. Then the door burst open. Patricia appeared, her face pale. Sebastian, you need to see this. She held out a tablet, the screen glowing with live news footage. Camila's stomach dropped as she saw it. Carmen, seated in an exclusive studio, her lips painted with victory as she spoke to a room full of cameras. "I know Sebastian Cain," Carmen purred to the interviewer. "I was engaged to him. I understand how he thinks. And this woman, this Camila Montenegro, she saw her opportunity. She lured him into a one-night stand years ago and hid the child until it suited her to claim the Cain name." Sebastian's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the tablet. "She doesn't know when to quit," he muttered, fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. But Camila heard something else in Carmen's tone, a new threat. This wasn't just slander. Carmen was planting seeds of doubt again, this time in the minds of investors, the board, the world. And if she succeeded, it wouldn't just be Camila's reputation destroyed, it would be Sebastian's empire. Sebastian turned to her, his green eyes alight with grim resolve. "She wants to tear us apart, but she doesn't understand something, Camila." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "I don't care about the empire. I don't care about the headlines. All I care about is him, and—" His hand hovered near hers, trembling with restraint. "And you." Her breath caught, every wall she had built threatening to collapse. For years she had told herself she didn't need anyone, that she could be mother and father, protector and provider. But standing there, looking at the man who was both her son's father and the only man who had ever seen her so fully, she wondered if she had been protecting her heart all this time, not Diego's. The storm outside raged louder than ever. Lawsuits, slander, paparazzi, boardroom politics. But in that small, glass-walled office, something unbreakable had begun to form. Not just survival, not just alliance, but the fragile, dangerous beginnings of a family. And as Sebastian reached for her hand at last, their fingers entwining with quiet inevitability, Camila realized that the greatest risk she had ever taken was not the job, not the secret, not the courtroom battles. It was daring to believe that love, real love, might be possible after all.